Welcome. Now we're going to look at various development theories. You need to understand at least one theory and show how an organization out there that's doing transformational development work, that's doing some sort of development work, what theory of development are they implementing? Do they come from a modernist neoliberal economic view, or do they have some other approach toward development, which could include transformational development? That'll be one of them. So obviously to do this, first you need a definition of development, and we've gone this far and haven't actually come up with a good definition, but I have some here. The development of capacities that expand economic actors' capabilities is one definition. The problem is that here in the word development, you have the word develop. In the definition of development, you have the word development, which is usually not helpful. But when we're talking about social justice, we're talking about developing capacities that expand economic capabilities. So this is primarily a neoliberal market-driven idea that from Feldman and Hajmakal, Kemeny, and Lanahan, who argue that to do community development work, international development work, is primarily an economic activity. You take entrepreneurship, marketplace activities, and you help expand them. Develop, notice, is a transitive verb. You don't just develop yourself, which would be reflexive, but it's something you do to others. We're going to develop them. And so it takes on a paternalistic idea of, I know what you need better than you do, and I'm going to develop you. I'm going to teach you. So that's why it's kind of an offensive term to some people. And so people have come up with other terms to describe the type of NGO that they work with, other than to use the word development. And then note that development is a humanist idea in the Enlightenment, when based on Greco-Roman ideas that humans will continue to get better and better and better, and especially by the beginning of the 20th century, the Western nations believed that they would just find a cure for every disease, that they would solve problems of unrest, and that there would be world peace, that they could solve every problem. And so they believed they could develop. And now by World War I, that was the end of optimism. And we stopped thinking in those terms of, kind of like a trajectory of endless progress, and now we no longer think we're heading that way. So anyway, here's an economic development idea from Feldman and others. Other definitions from Perrault is the combination of mental and social changes in a people that make it fit to increase its total real product cumulatively and durably. So it recognizes that the end goal is economic development. You will have a greater gross national product, which is a typical marker for international development, or a greater per capita income, which would be a good marker for community development. But it recognizes that the changes aren't just increasing economic capabilities, not just helping people be better entrepreneurs, teaching people a skill, giving them literacy, giving them some capital, giving them microloans. It's more than that. It's mental and social changes. So it may mean changing laws to be more just so people can flourish in the economic sphere. It may mean giving better educational systems so people can flourish. But again, it's a set of skills leading to economic development. A definition that I have given is human flourishing, based on earlier lectures, that development is helping people flourish. They bear the image of God, and developing them helps them see who they are in God's eyes, helps them be creative, helps them attain the goals that and callings that they recognize God giving them. Now, unfortunately, as Rist pointed out, development is often disappointing. We dig wells and we find out that nobody continues to maintain them, or nobody even continues to get water from the well, and they go somewhere else. Or we develop literacy materials and find out that the books sit and gather dust on a shelf. Or We hand out microloans for people to enter the entrepreneurial world, and instead they use those microloans for funerals or for parties rather than for uh, development that will help them progress. Here, an atheist has written an article saying that, yeah, even though he doesn't believe in God, he thinks missionary work is necessary in Africa because he sees the development work. Before Christmas, I returned after 45 years to the country that as a boy I knew as Nyasaland. Today it's Malawi. And the Times Christmas appeal included a small British charity working there, Pump Aid. Rural communities install simple pumps, letting people keep their village wells sealed and clean. I went to see the work. It inspired me, renewing my flagging faith in development charities. But traveling in Malawi refreshed another belief too, one I've been trying to banish all my life, but an observation I've been unable to avoid since my African childhood. It confounds my ideological beliefs, stubbornly refuses to fit my worldview, and has embarrassed my growing belief that there's no God. So even though he's lost his faith in God, he renewed his faith in NGOs and especially Christian charities, not just because they were bringing wells or clean water. Here's what he says in the third paragraph. As a confirmed atheist, I've become convinced of the enormous contribution that Christian evangelism makes in Africa, sharply distinct from the work of secular NGOs, government projects, and international aid efforts. These alone will not do. Education and training alone will not do. In Africa, Christianity changes people's hearts. It brings a spiritual transformation. The rebirth is real, the change is good. I used to avoid this truth by applauding as you can the practical work of mission churches in Africa. It's a pity, I would say, that salvation is part of the package. But Christians, black and white, working in Africa, do heal the sick, do teach people to read and write, and only the severest kind of secularist could see a mission hospital or a school and say that the world would be better without it. I would allow that if faith was needed to motivate missionaries to help, then fine, but what counted was the help, not the faith. But this does not fit the facts. Faith does more than support the missionary. It transferred to the flock. This is the effect that matters so immensely, which I can't help observing. So he's saying that what he realized was that faith was not just like a necessary evil of these missionary efforts. And yeah, it's great they're doing the hospitals and such, but too bad they have to do the faith. And then maybe he would say, well, at least the faith compels them to do good. But now he realized that the faith itself had a good in and of itself as it transformed Africa and brought and became the African, it became owned by African Christians. Okay, now we're going to look at development theories. So there are two levels of development theories. You have the national level or the macro development, and then the grassroots level or the micro development. And within the national level, I'm going to look at 4 types of theories. And at the grassroots level, 4 types of theories. So you need to understand the names and be able to pick one that best explains what your organization that you're looking at, what is their development theory. Are they the modernization theory, like the earlier definition I gave, that defines development in terms of income and tries to build capacity of people to reach that income? So this is what we see when people are giving microloans. We see it in the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and that it's the general view within democratic countries that are capitalist. And in the textbook that you have, Poverty of Nations. Another view of development is the human development theory, which goes beyond just economic development and looks at other markers that we will get to. A third is dependency theory, which is an anti-colonial view or a more critical view. And then the fourth is a sustainable development view, which is kind of a negative growth, or let's stop being so capitalist in our outlook. So the first two are more, the first one is most capitalist, the second one is a little less capitalist, and the third and fourth are fairly anti-capitalist. Now we look at the grassroots levels, which tend to not get into ideas of capitalism or colonialism. The first one is the holistic model transformational development, like your textbook Myers, and which I've already had another lecture on. Other grassroots levels ones don't look at transformational development, but they talk about fair trade. That would be a model of micro development or community development. Others might be just any NGO or AusAid or USAID and asset-based community development. So we're going to go ahead and get into them. First of all, why is dreaming important? Imagine you put a water tank with roofing iron on a building to catch the water. What is your goal there? Is the goal simply that for as long as it lasts, it brings clean water? It's like handing someone, food for a day. Is it that, well, it's really just to signal a long-time relationship. I'm entering into a relationship with you. Today it's a, well, tomorrow you might want something else from me, and I'm here to be your sponsor, your patron. Is the goal, to save lives for today? Or can you dream bigger? I want to bring fresh water to every community in XYZ area. So it's important to know when we engage in in any type of development work, what are we going for? Is it primarily the relationships? Is it primarily something that you can mark physically of a certain number of hospitals, a certain number of schools, a certain number of students in school? Or is it more of an intangible thing, trusting relationships built, people having more confidence in themselves and in God? And so you might have multiple levels, of goals, but it's important to dream about, we had someone donate money for a cow. Well, what was their long-term goal here? What was their dream? We had someone donate money for a water supply, but what was the end goal here? So it's important to think this through. Now, another example I have from my own history in development work, World Vision built these aid posts. They built 25 of them on our island. Small cement block buildings, very small, maybe only 2 meters by 2 meters. What was their goal? What was their dream about it? How would they define success? I think that really the way they reported back to their donors was, we built 25 aid posts. And so the goal was to build the physical building, to go into a community, to use the money and spend it. So they had 100% success at that goal. If their goal was that there were sustainable aid posts with continually increasing capacity of aid post workers who had a sustainable resource of Band-Aids and stitches and medicines, they failed, because what those aid posts ended up being was temporary housing for the big man. Some important politician or pastor might come through the village and he would stay there. It would be the nicest home in the village because it was a cement block home. But other than that, there were no supplies updated and no aid post workers positioned at these places. And so it was either a failure or a success depending on who's counting. But you can go even bigger than just sustainable aid posts. You can talk about, as Bill Gates Foundation tried to eradicate malaria on the entire island, and did a pretty good job of it, through shortening the life of mosquitoes through a certain chemical so they couldn't reproduce. So again, it's important to dream big and to know what the goal is and to know how you're going to define success. Is it the building of buildings? Is it the changing of people's attitudes? Is it increasing people's lifespan? Is it injecting a certain amount of money? Is it just relief, helping people out for a while? Okay, here's just a comic strip joke about modernization theory. Notice that before there is this picture of a happy family of mother, father, son, and daughter living with their chickens in their hut. And afterward, you see there's alcoholism, there's broken families, there's graffiti and presumably gangs. Someone's on drugs. Apparently there's homelessness. And they've moved into a town and you can see the nuclear reactor or whatever and the airplane taking off polluting and broken windows. So a commentary that, are we really developing as we're modernizing? Is capitalism really the answer? I think that that's kind of overstating the happiness of the before picture. The before picture could also show suffering from malaria, short lifespan, pulmonary problems, and certainly issues with gender inequalities, girls not being able to read, maybe a very low literacy rate as it is, governments who are treating minority groups unfairly because they don't have access to education. So the before picture is unrealistic, and the after picture is only stating the negative side without stating longer lifespans, more creativity, people flourishing in all sorts of businesses they never could have imagined, people being educated to a degree never before, people entering and having political voice that they never had before. Okay, so we'll come back and we'll look at modernization theory.